South Korea's economic structure has always been different from most developed economies. Its most unique aspect that has continuously set it apart is low government debt. Here's a comparative graph of South Korea and many other major economies' general government debt to GDP as published by the International Monetary Fund. What this data basically tells us is how much debt the government has accumulated in relation to the size of its economy, measured by GDP. As you can see from the graph right here, South Korea's government debt has always been low, with the latest year available for 2024 showing 52.9%. This data has then led many to believe that South Korea's economy is free from economic risk. Having lesser debt, after all, means that they have lower economic risk to things like economic shocks, global financial crises, or unexpected downturns. And the reason is very simple. Whenever an economic crisis happens, like the COVID-19 pandemic, governments often have to stimulate their economies. To stimulate one's economies means to borrow money, to help small businesses survive, to ensure that farmers can continue to produce food, and to provide financial relief to vulnerable populations. Hence, South Korea's economy, due to its low debt, is arguably one of the safest out there from economic risks. But there's a big problem that South Korea faces that many people have been worried about, and it's private debt. Private debt is basically the amount of debt held by individuals and businesses, rather than the government. These can be the household debt, which are borrowed by normal people for mortgages, car loans, credit card loans, and so on. Corporate debt, on the other hand, is for businesses, which they can use to buy equipment, business expansions, and so on. Household debt, specifically, has been under an alarming rate as of late. Here's a graph with data that we collected from the International Monetary Fund. The graph, which is based on the IMF's household debt, loans and debt securities as a percentage of GDP, shows a clear picture of how fast South Korea's household debt to GDP has risen. While in recent years the debt has contracted, it is still amongst the highest in the entire world. As a matter of fact, if we add Japan, the United States, Germany, and France to this list, we get to see just how high South Korea's household debt is. These very nations are known to have much higher government debts to GDP than South Korea, yet South Korea stands out as a significant holder of household debt. Here's another table on the IMF's Global Debt Database for household debt on the highest household debt to GDP in the entire world. You can see that South Korea, for 2023, is the fourth highest, just behind Switzerland, Australia, and Canada. This huge size of household debt has then caused many to believe that South Korea's economy is vulnerable to economic risks. There are several studies out there that point out the effects of household debt to one's economy. One article, published by the IMF back in 2017, said that, in the short term, rising household debt typically boosts economic growth and employment. This is because individuals take on debt to make significant purchases, such as homes and cars, which stimulates demand in sectors like construction, manufacturing, and retail. But after about 3 to 5 years, the short-term benefits of rising household debt are reversed. Highly indebted households would reduce their spending to focus on repaying their loans, which slows economic growth. Here's a graph with data that we collected from the IMF on their study. On the left side, the economic impact has a positive effect on the economy in the short term, but 3 years later, the impact then becomes negative. But what makes this more negative is that the gain is nowhere near the contraction felt 3 years after. So, knowing that, is South Korea's economy in trouble because of its high household debt? Is the country's economy going to feel a negative effect from this high household debt? Well, indicating this is quite difficult as economies vary from one after another. But if the IMF study does stand true, then we might be able to suggest that South Korea may indeed face significant economic challenges in the medium term due to its high household debt. But, as the IMF also indicated, there are other factors out there that can influence all these. So, in the end, it might be difficult or even impossible to conclude one right answer. What we want to know now, however, is the composition of South Korea's household debt. What are people borrowing? Is it cars, houses, to buy luxury travel, to invest in the stock market maybe? Well, here's a graph with data published by Statistics Korea on South Korea's household debt composition as of mid-2022. As you can see, a large bulk of it is tied to mortgage loans. This is true for nearly every single economy out there. Mortgage loans will always be the largest form of household debt. But South Korea's economy is unique in this aspect. They have a concept called jeonse, and it is a major factor contributing to the high levels of household debt in the country. Jeonse is a unique housing rental system in South Korea, where tenants pay a large lump sum deposit, often ranging from 50% to 80% of the property's value, to the landlord in place of monthly rent. This deposit is returned to the tenant at the end of the lease, typically 2 years, without interest. For instance, if a tenant rents an apartment valued at 500 million Korean won, approximately $380,000, they may need to pay a jeonse deposit of 250 to 400 million won up front. Many individuals and families cannot afford such large sums outright, so they take out loans from banks to cover the deposit. Some news articles out there said that an estimated 25% of the total mortgage loans is for jeonse deposits, while the rest is for home purchases. Beyond the high household debt of South Korea, there are also other private debts that are fairly high in the country. As we mentioned earlier, the other one is corporate debt. Here's a graph on the non-financial corporate debt, all instruments, as data published by the International Monetary Fund. What this data captures is the total debt incurred by South Korea's non-financial corporations across various borrowing instruments, including loans, bonds, and other credit facilities. These can be from companies like Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and other prominent chaebols, as well as small and medium-sized enterprises. As you can see, South Korea's corporate debt, as of the latest year, sits at just 166% of GDP. Is it a lot? Well, let's compare it to other countries. As you can see, in the newer graph, South Korea's corporate debt is higher than the United States, Japan, and Germany, with data availability only stretching to 2022 for Japan and Germany and a long list of other major economies out there. This list does indeed indicate that South Korea has a high corporate debt, but there are still other major economies out there with much higher ones, like the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, and so on. Understanding whether this is a problem or not is, again, just like household debt, going to be difficult. One of the concerns that we see was due to rising interest rates and global monetary tightening which occurred in recent years. Here's a graph on South Korea's interest rates, which as you can see has risen from just 0.5% in 2021 to over 3.5% by 2023. Although interest rates have gone down to 3% as of the latest data, it is still fairly high when we compare it to previous years. The reason why high interest rates are bad for corporations is because they make loans more expensive for companies to roll over existing debt or issue new bonds, which then increase the financial burden on already indebted firms. Or, put it simply, high interest rates mean that borrowing money becomes more expensive for companies. This directly affects their ability to finance operations, expand, or invest in new projects. Despite that, domestic credit to the private sector as a percentage of GDP has still gone up, as of the latest data available as published by the World Bank. What this means is that private sector borrowing remains robust despite the rising interest rates. This indicates that companies in South Korea are continuing to rely on credit to finance their operations, investments, and growth, even as the cost of borrowing increases. Finally, let's sum these all up and see just how big the entire private debt of South Korea is compared to other economies. As you can see from the graph, data from the International Monetary Fund, the private debt of South Korea, as of the latest year, is at 263% of GDP. Comparatively to the same economies that we used earlier, Germany, the United States, and Japan, South Korea's private debt is indeed high. But the list for the IMF's largest in the entire world shows that South Korea's private debt to GDP is just ranked at 7th globally, with the highest in the entire world being the Netherlands at 306%. However, it is difficult to compare South Korea to these economies like the Netherlands, Switzerland, and the other economies, considering how their economies are very much different from South Korea. What we should know on whether South Korea's private debt is too big of a problem is going to need a lot of study to actually back up the problems that it might cause. However, you can also make a claim that there are still going to be a lot of risks to it. There's a lot of economists and analysts out there that have already been calling out the government to help fix this issue. That just means that they see some form of risk in it. Now, before we end the video, let's talk about how these might affect South Korea's government debt. And yes, if there are any issues in South Korea's private debt, they will indeed impact South Korea's government debt. And this is what we already mentioned earlier. If a country or South Korea's corporate or household debt were to cause some issues to South Korea's economy, whether for instance in the form of a recession or a financial crisis, the government would likely have to step in to stabilize the economy. This could take several forms, including bailouts for corporations, increased social welfare spending, or targeted stimulus packages. All of these interventions would require additional government borrowing, potentially raising South Korea's public debt levels. To put this video into simplicity, South Korea's government debt might be low, but that doesn't mean the economy is risk-free. It has risks that some other economies don't have, economies that may have high government debt, but low private debt. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.